I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Welcome. I see a few new faces. For those of you joining us at these seminars for the first time, I'm Sarah Kozlowski. I'm Associate Director of the Edith O'Donnell Institute of Art History and Director of the Center for the Art and Architectural History of Port Cities in Naples. And as you know, the center is a collaboration between the O'Donnell Institute, the Museo di Capodimonte, and Franklin University, Switzerland. For this meeting of our spring series of research seminars, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Claire Van Cleave, who is an American Friends of Capodimonte Senior Fellow and has been working on the Capodimonte's collection of drawings and prints, carrying out research on that important collection, a collection that's not as well known as it should be, but will be soon, as well as cataloging for the museum's digitization project. So this talk dovetails beautifully with the talk that Gianluca Puccio gave last semester, and I see you, Gianluca, I'm so glad that you're here, and the talk that Carmine gave a couple of weeks ago. So before I introduce Claire, I would invite everyone to turn off your cameras and mics, and we'll turn them back on for our discussion after. I know we'll have a lot to talk about. And Claire, if you would like to share your screen.
Let's make sure I can do this right.
Okay.
How's that?
We don't see it yet.
Oh, I know. Wait, hang on. I've done the wrong thing. Just a minute. I'm sorry. I practiced this, but I forgot to do the right thing. So give me a moment.
There we go.
And then if I make this full screen.
And if you hit there you go. There we go. Okay. Oops. Excuse me one moment. Okay. Dr. Claire Van Cleave is a scholar of Renaissance art and a specialist in Italian drawings. She was educated at Georgetown, the Courtauld, and Oxford, where she wrote a dissertation on the drawings of Luca Signorelli. She's the author of Master Drawings of the Italian Renaissance, published by Harvard University Press in 2007, a volume on the drawings by Raphael held at the British Museum, published in 2008, and a co-author of Italian Master Drawings from the Princeton University Museum of Art, published in 2014. She curated and wrote about the drawings shown in the Signorelli exhibition in Perugia in 2012, and she's currently at work on a project at the Uffizi in Florence. Last fall, she was appointed as American Friends of Capodimonte Senior Fellow with a brief to work on the museum's Gabinetto dei Disegni e delle Stampe. Her talk today will focus on the nucleus of the Capodimonte collection, the corpus of drawings that survive from the Farnese collection that was formed beginning in the 16th century and that came to Naples by way of Charles of Bourbon. So welcome, Claire, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Do you know, I thought I'd start with a picture of you, somewhat to make Francesca laugh, but also to show you where I'd really like to be right now. And I was a bit nervous about doing this talk because I haven't spoken to a lot of people in a year, like many of us, but it's really heartwarming to see so many friends in front of me on the screen and to have Sylvain join us as well. So I'm delighted. As I said, the image in front of you is where I would like to be right now, which is in the drawings department at Capodimonte. I'm immensely thankful to the American Friends of Capodimonte and its board for funding my work and appointing me as their first senior fellow. The mission of the American Friends is to place an American scholar within the Capodimonte curatorial team. It's normally a postdoctoral student, but in this extraordinary COVID year, a senior fellowship was created as a research-based project with the knowledge that it might be hard for a scholar to travel to Italy. My absence from Naples and even from research libraries here in the UK where I live has endured much longer than I ever anticipated, but we all have to learn to adapt. And my heart goes out to all the Italian friends who are now going into the red zone, some of which who have been there already, some new ones who are joining today. My research project is to catalog the drawings from the Farnese collection for the museum's online catalog, and hopefully, if we can find funding, to mount a physical exhibition of the Farnese drawings. This is a screenshot of the current page on the Capodimonte website dedicated to the Gabinetto Disegni e delle Stampe, or GDS. I present it to you so you can appreciate the starting point of the current digitalization project in terms of the collection of prints and drawings. There are only 6 cropped images on the web page you see, with no further information on the drawings in the photos. There are no individual entries on works of art, either here or anywhere on the existing Capodimonte site. There is nowhere to search provenance, to understand technique, or to check the size of a drawing, not to mention that there is no discussion of attribution or subject matter. In addition, there has been no systematic approach to inventory numbers, even in Capodimonte publications. This is our starting position, not only with the GDS, but museum-wide. Director Bellinger has made digitizing the entire Capodimonte collection a priority of his tenure. Everything from paintings to sculpture to decorative arts, the armory, and even the plants in the Bosco are being photographed. And of course, works on paper play a key role. Carmine Romano's talk last month gave an overview of the work on the digitization project, and he was kind enough to leave it to me to explain more about the work on the drawings. First of all, the drawings are now universally referred to by the GDS numbers they were given in 1978. This one, for example, is now styled GDS 1037, which will enable not only those of us within the museum, but people outside of the museum to ask for a particular drawing. Now, if I've done this right, drawings have been systematically photographed in high resolution images, enabling a more precise record of style, technique, and state of conservation than has been the normal practice. Catalog entries to be uploaded on the new website will include information on technique, size, literature, provenance, inventory citations, and of course, a discussion of the authorship, how the work fits into the artist's career, and an exploration of the subject matter. As we begin the 3rd decade of the 21st century, it seems almost ridiculous to have to explain the goals of the digital project out loud. But at Capodimonte, the works of art, and above all the drawings, have been jealously guarded in the shadows, away from the gaze of external scholars and the public for too long. I joined Director Bellinger and the team in wanting to shine light on this neglected and too often overlooked collection, which is surely one of the treasures of Italy. My project is very specifically focused on the Farnese collection, but for the digitization of the remaining works on paper, we are also calling upon external scholars to help. Excuse me. Gianluca Puccio's talk to this group in November, and I'm glad he's here today, highlighted his doctoral work on Padre Resta and the Bourbon collection that will supplement the museum's catalog. Viviana Farina is also joining our tiny group of drawing scholars who will contribute entries, and Carmine Romano, in his ample free time, is also hoping to work on digitizing the remaining Gemito drawings that were not cataloged in the recent Paris or Naples exhibitions. Currently, there is no dedicated curator of drawings appointed by the Ministry of Culture at Capodimonte. And Sylvain has just told me that the custodian is also retiring soon. The entire collection of the GDS is comprised of nearly 3,000 drawings and an astounding 24,000 prints. The period of collecting spans from the 16th century with the Farnese cardinals in Rome through the 18th century reign of the Bourbon kings in Naples and on to the present day. The Farnese collection represents the oldest part of the holdings. I count 57 drawings in the Farnese collection today. Upon entering the Farnese galleries in the museum, the visitor is confronted with this view of 5 portraits of the Farnese Pope Paul III. Note the central portrait by Titian of Paul with his grandsons Cardinal Alessandro and his brother Ottavio, the future Duke of Parma. The Farnese collection is widely understood to mean the works of art, including paintings, sculpture, both ancient and modern, decorative arts, armor, and also drawings that Charles of Bourbon inherited from his mother, Elisabetta Farnese, when he became King of Naples in 1734. By this point in the 18th century, the collection represented 200 years of ownership, stretching from Paul III through his grandsons, Cardinal Ranuccio and Alessandro and Duke Ottavio, to his grandnephew, Cardinal Odoardo, and on to successive Dukes of Parma. What remains today is just a fraction of the collection at its height in the 16th century. Here's another portrait of Cardinal Alessandro. Early inventories exist for the Farnese cardinals and their trusted colleagues, Giulio Clovio and Fulvio Orsini, some of which tell us about Farnese interest in collecting drawings. On the whole, archival work conducted by a range of art historians has focused largely on Farnese architecture, paintings, and antiquities. Archival work on the drawings, unlike that of the rest of the collection, has been mainly conducted by Capodimonte staff from the late 1980s through the early 2000s. My new research is already proving that there is information on the drawings hiding in plain sight amongst wider scholarship on Farnese patronage and collecting. We seem to be entering a very productive moment of scholarly interest in the Farnese archives. As Carmine told us a few weeks ago, he's making digital records and new transcriptions of the archives in the museum. In addition, Mario Epifani, the director of the Palazzo Reale in Naples, is also engaged with the history of the collections, and Andrea Donati's work on the intellectual and artistic circles around Michelangelo and Titian, including new forays into the Vatican archives, is also leading to a renewed examination of Farnese inventories. Thanks to COVID, I have not yet met Candida Carino at the Archivio in Naples, but it is clear to me that she also represents this new wave of curiosity of the archival sources and desire to share and make the Farnese documents more accessible. It is my expectation that together we will be able to take Farnese scholarship to the next level, and I hope new light will be shown on the history of their collection of drawings. This talk is not the forum to go down the rabbit hole of every single Farnese inventory, although I would like to, but we should touch upon a few important historical sources to illuminate the family's intentions for their collection, including the drawings. In the wills of both Cardinal Alessandro and Fulvio Orsini, the Palazzo Farnese in Rome is described as a scuola pubblica, making it clear that the intention of the collection was to teach. Both Cardinal Alessandro's will of 1587 and Cardinal Odoardo's will of 1626 specifically state that the collection should remain, quote, nella casa nostra a Roma, with no sales, loans, or moves. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this was only respected for a few decades after the death of Odoardo, as the family's focus turned away from Rome and the Vatican towards Parma and the ducal territories. Presumably Paul III could have had any Michelangelo drawing he wanted, but sadly there is no evidence of the Pope's collecting of works on paper. Research on his grandsons, Ranuccio and Alessandro, continues, but no clear inventories of their collections of works on paper have come to light. However, we know that each of the brothers was collecting drawings alongside Fulvio Orsini, the trusted historian and librarian who served 3 successive Farnese cardinals, that is, Ranuccio, Alessandro, and finally Odoardo. For example, we know that Cardinal Alessandro paid 500 scudi to purchase drawings from Michelangelo's friend Tommaso de' Cavalieri, who died in 1587, and that Orsini also purchased drawings from Tommaso at the time. Fulvio Orsini. Much of the focus on the early Farnese collection of drawings has been on the works identified in the will of Orsini. For decades, he had been established in rooms upstairs in the Palazzo Farnese, where both his and the Farnese collections were available to study. Orsini died in 1600, by which time Ranuccio and Alessandro were both dead, and their great nephew, Cardinal Odoardo, lived in the Palazzo. Fulvio's testament of 1600 details 113 items left to the Farnese, many of which are works on paper, in recognition of his long-standing relationship with the family and the desire to maintain the scuola pubblica in the Palazzo. One of the most famous examples of a drawing presumed to be from Orsini's collection is Michelangelo's Fall of Phaeton, now in the British Royal Collection at Windsor Castle. This is assumed to be the following entry in his will: Quadro corniciato di noce col disegno del carro di Fatone di lapis nero di mano del Michelangelo. It also appears in later Farnese inventories. I want to make absolutely clear that this work is documented in the Farnese collection until the late 18th century. Therefore, it is technically also a Farnese drawing, even if it is no longer a part of the collection at Capodimonte. I should add here that I am not cataloging this drawing, but I wanted to make clear that the Farnese collection comprises much more than what's at Capodimonte today. The bulk of what today are considered the gems of the Farnese drawings collection do come from Orsini's collection. And the Farnese collection of drawings is often defined in literature by Fulvio Orsini's masterpieces, but in reality, there was so much more. Don Giulio. I'm showing you here the wonderful El Greco portrait of Giulio Clovio holding the Farnese hours that he created for Cardinal Alessandro. The book is now in the Pierpont Morgan Library in New York. And here's a detail of the portrait and the 2 pages that are open in the portrait. Focus on Fulvio Orsini has perhaps led to ignorance of the importance of Giulio Clovio to the Farnese collection. It has always been recognized that there are works by him and of him in the Farnese collection, but it is not widely recognized that in his wills of 1577 and 1578, he clearly left drawings to Cardinal Alessandro. These included works by Michelangelo and Raphael, as well as drawings by Clovio himself. This fact seems to be known by Clovio and Raphael scholars. In fact, John Shearman publishes it, but not recognized by previous scholars of the Farnese drawings collection. Clearly, more work needs to be done. This is an image of the Piazza Farnese in 1664, so nearly contemporary with what I'm about to tell you about, with the enormous baths from Carcalla and the Palazzo behind. In 1626, Odoardo Farnese died, and in the aftermath of his death, we have the first really complete inventory of the Palazzo. Other inventories may come to light, but in the 19th and 20th centuries, this 1644 inventory has been the most studied and thought to be the most complete extant inventory of the palace, representing the height of the family's collections. You might remember that I told you Odoardo, like his great uncle Alessandro, stipulated in his will that the Palazzo Farnese and its treasures be kept intact. But the inventory of 1644, made less than 20 years after his death, indicates that his heirs may have been having other ideas. Reading the inventory from start to finish is a guided tour through the rooms of the Palazzo, making note of every object, from exalted paintings in Gran Salone to humble cooking instruments in hidden kitchens. And what do we find listed alongside possessions, both exalted and humble? Drawings. Many of the drawings cited were to be found in the Libreria Superiore. Perhaps this was part of Orsini's former suite of rooms. There are more than 500 drawings in the 1644 inventory. We now know that this large group of drawings benefited from the collecting of Ranuccio, Alessandro, Don Giulio Clovio, and Fulvio Orsini. The inventory makes clear that the drawings were kept in 3 ways: loose, books, and framed. Let's examine some of the entries. This is a random selection of some of the better preserved drawings, Farnese drawings in the collection at Capodimonte that we might imagine could have been held loosely. The loose drawings are often described with attributions, but few other indications that lead to an identification of the drawing. For example, un disegno di Parmigianino. Well, that doesn't really tell us very much. Or due disegni di Polidoro da Caravaggio, cioè due in un foglio. Or even more vaguely, 78 disegni diversi di diverse mani, which means 78 different drawings by different hands. The works are attributed to Michelangelo, Raphael, Clovio, Marcello Venusti, Polidoro, Daniele dal Volterra, Parmigianino, Annibale Carracci, Bartolomeo Pazzarotti, Rosso Fiorentino, and others. Almost exclusively artists who lived and worked in the 16th century. The second way drawings seem to have been kept in the Palazzo Farnese is bound in books. The references to these books are tantalizingly short, and we have no extant evidence of them surviving today. One entry says, un libro con 23 disegni, or the more beautiful, hang on, I have to take a sip before I read this. Un librone grande con coperto d'ebano e canna d'India, con sopra coperta di corame nero, dentro il quale sono 85 carte di disegni antichi, parte di Raffaello e parte di Michelangelo, e in una di dette carte c'è un foglio intero, cioè un disegno per ciascun mezzo foglio, which roughly means a large book bound in ebony and encased in leather that was full of drawings by Michelangelo and Raphael, where there seem to have been 2 drawings mounted on each page. I might mention that there is no mention of these books in the Orsini will, so it is likely that they represent Farnese collecting from before 1600. Finally, the 1644 inventory lists framed drawings. These were evidently the stars of the collection, worthy of being hung on the walls and therefore granted reverence accorded to paintings. Normally, the frame sheets were described as laid down on canvas and framed in walnut or ebony. Here you see the celebrated work by Sofonisba Anguissola of her brother being bitten by a crab. This drawing is astounding not only because it is by a woman artist in the 16th century, but also because we know that Michelangelo himself challenged her to make a drawing of a weeping boy to exhibit her skills. This is recorded in a letter by Tommaso de' Cavalieri and would have been a story known to Fulvio Orsini, in whose collection the drawing eventually landed. Un quadretto corniciato di noce di mano di Sofonisba col ritratto suo e un putto che piange. It's identified as in the Orsini will. It appears again in the 1644 inventory as un quadretto in carta tirata in tavola con cornicetta di noce attorno, disegnati in chiaroscuro, un bambino che piange morso da un grancio e una zitella che porge un canistrello di frutti, mano di Sofonisba. And here's a detail of the boy's head. The state of conservation of this drawing is dire, but perhaps this is evidence of the toll of centuries from being hung on the walls. So what's left in the collection? There's a 90-year span between the 1644 Palazzo Farnese inventory and Elisabetta Farnese's gift to her son Charles in 1734. A lot happened in those years to the collection. After Odoardo, the palace in Rome was never again inhabited by a Farnese cardinal. In the wake of any direct influence in the Vatican, the family focused less on Rome and more on their territories in and around Parma. In breach of the wills of the earlier generations, many of the masterpieces were sent up to Parma, where a new treasure house was established. Eventually, many of the treasures were sent back to Rome and eventually to Naples. But the journey does not stop there. When Ferdinand, the Bourbon king, who you see down here on horseback, fled Naples for the city of Palermo when, as Napoleonic troops advanced, he took some of the collection with him. The French, under Joseph Bonaparte and later Murat, ruled Naples for 4 years, during which the fate of the drawings is somewhat unclear. After the French rule and the restitution of the Bourbons, there was far less movement of the collection. Many of the drawings in the present day collection can be traced back to the early 19th century museum inventories and seem to have been housed in the Reggia ever since. So as I said before, I count that there are 57 drawings remaining at Capodimonte in the Farnese collection, which begs the question, what happened to the remainder of the 500 sheets from the 1644 inventory? A number of drawings that are no longer in the collection are identifiable from Farnese inventories. We've already looked at the Fall of Phaeton, now in Windsor, which is presumed to be from Orsini's collection. And here are 2 other examples of Farnese drawings identifiable in modern, but not the Capodimonte collections. On the left, you see Raphael's Aeneas and Anchises, now in the Albertina in Vienna. And on the right, you see Michelangelo's cartoon, which has been called the Epifania, now in the British Museum in London. Interestingly, this cartoon was still in the Farnese collection as late as 1753, when it was given to Cardinal Silvio Valenti Gonzaga as a diplomatic gift. So we can assume that it was probably amongst the drawings that came to Naples with the Farnese collection in 1734. It is tantalizing to speculate on how the drawings left the collection. Were the Farnese selling off or giving gifts, such as the Epifania? Did Christina of Sweden, who rented the Palazzo Farnese in 1655 to 56, purchase or even take any drawings? What about Cardinal Alessandro Albani in the in the 18th century, who was a well-connected dealer in drawings? Did they disappear when the French sacked Capodimonte in 1799? Or shortly afterwards, when the Bourbons fled to Palermo, did they take drawings with them? What about Lucien Bonaparte? Was he given access to Capodimonte treasures when his brother Joseph was king of Naples? Surprisingly little scholarship has been done to question what happened to the original collection of drawings. Illustrious modern collections, some of which I've already mentioned, cite Fulvio Orsini's ownership in the provenance of their holdings, but often ignored what happened to the drawing between Orsini's study, remember he died in 1600, and the 18th century, neglecting to recognize that the drawings remained in the Farnese collection long after Orsini's death. Let's leave the inventories and speculation on this, because we won't answer this today, and return to an overview of what is left in the museum. Traditionally, Orsini's drawings have been seen as the stars of the collection. That's partly because of their size and attributions. On the left, you see here Michelangelo's cartoon for the Cappella Paolina, and on the right, the fresco, and you'll see the soldiers in the bottom left of the painting. Not only is this one of only 2 extant cartoons by Michelangelo, the second being the Epifania, which we just looked at, but it is, of course, of even greater importance to the Farnese collection because it is linked to Paul III's commission in the Vatican. This is the only surviving cartoon by Michelangelo for one of his own paintings. There is also one more cartoon at Capodimonte, the Venus and Amore, which is associated with Michelangelo, but thought to have been started by him and completed by some of his followers. Another one of the stars from the Orsini collection is this Raphael cartoon of Moses in front of the burning bush for the ceiling of the stanza dell'Odoro. And just because we have such great pictures of things, here's a close-up, including the pouncing, which always gets me excited. It's truly, there's hardly any Raphael cartoons of this size, except for one really enormous one, but we'll ignore that one for a minute. This is an extraordinary survival. Another extraordinary survival that seems to have been in Orsini's collection is, of course, the Sofonisba that we've already examined, and a very close copy currently attributed to Gianluca Pegni after Raphael's Madonna del Divino Amore, which you see on the screen now. The painting, which is at Capodimonte, and the drawing, which is also at Capodimonte, are both on the screen. This last work has just opened up a whole new can of worms for me. It has traditionally been linked to an entry in Orsini's will, but I have noticed a citation in Clovio's will that sounds remarkably similar, and I am starting to wonder if we might be wrong to think that it comes from Orsini's collection. Although it is the same size as Raphael's painting, it is certain that it is not certain that it was drawn by Pegni, Raphael's trusted agent, nicknamed Il Fattore, but it's probably not for the painting, but it's a copy done after the painting. And of course, we know that Clovio made a lot of copies of things. It doesn't look like Clovio, but you can see the mind boggles with all of this information. And it may be essential to re-question some of the things that we thought we knew the answers to. Drawings that can be traced back to Orsini represent just a handful of the 57 remaining drawings. So what's left once the Orsini drawings are removed? 60% of what remains is comprised of about 25 sheets attributable to or very close to Parmigianino. Here are 4 examples from the collection. The Parmigianino drawings at Capodimonte tend to date from his Roman projects through the end of his life and touch upon a wide range of his paintings and prints. Frustratingly, it seems nearly impossible to identify any of the Parmigianino drawings in the collection with citation in the early inventories. Presumably, they were amongst the loose sheets or the ones bound in books that are not fully described in the 1644 inventory. Over and above the 25 sheets attributable to Parmigianino, there are around 7 more ascribed to Bedoli, Bertoia, and Gandini del Glado. That is to say, artists very close to Parmigianino. And this is the recto and verso of a drawing attributed to Bertoia. My conclusion is that the present day Farnese collection at Capodimonte is mainly a group of Emilian drawings, a point which seems to me to be rarely recognized. You may have noticed from many of the images I've shown that the condition of the drawings at Capodimonte is, to say it nicely, problematic. This could be partly due to the fact that so many were hung on the walls over the centuries. Not only at the Palazzo Farnese, but also at Capodimonte, the drawings were hung on the walls in the Reggia, regardless of the harsh conditions that Naples presents. But centuries of display are not the only culprits. Even the way many drawings are mounted is a problem. Some are even hinged twice. So we're looking at a drawing by Parmigianino that you can see is much faded. The hinges are at the top. This is on the left. I don't know if you can follow my mouse, but I'm doing it. So the hinge is on the top. If you turn that over, you see this, and you see the support with the modern attributions on it. But if you look at this right side here, it's also been hinged on that side, and the verso of the drawing is actually visible. In order to see this, the drawing needs to be handled, and that's not good for a sheet of paper that's this old. Mats with windows on the recto and verso are non-existent, meaning that the drawings need to be handled, as I've just explained. Director Belanger and I are hoping that there could be a new restoration campaign on the Farnese collection of drawings. When I told you at the beginning of the lecture that none of the drawings are cataloged online, I did not touch upon how seldom they have been published. Despite the illustrious provenance of the collection, which, as I have shown, is at times an unbroken line from the hand of Michelangelo to the GDS at Capodimonte, the collection remains surprisingly unknown, even in scholarly circles. This is partly due to past management of the museum, when scholarship was too often jealously guarded. However, they did write catalogs, and the most comprehensive published catalog of the Farnese drawings remains the entries hidden at the back of the first volume of the Capodimonte Farnese catalogs, the cover of which you see here. Other than this catalog, any scholarly contributions on the Farnese drawings have normally been museum publications or written by museum employees, often Rosanna Muzzi. Her entries are very good, but on the whole, the in-house scholarship lacks diverse perspectives and approaches to cataloging. Unfortunately, there are also few errors. None of us are perfect. The inventories are incomplete and sometimes mistranscribed. And 4 Parmigianino drawings, of which you see 3 tiny examples here, were inadvertently omitted from the publication you saw on the previous page. This was rectified in an article by Leone de Castris in 2003, and then forgotten again by the time I arrived this past autumn and was given the quote unquote definitive list by the custodian in the GDS. The only exceptions are the cartoons by Michelangelo, Raphael, and the Sophonisba of the boy bitten by a crab, which have garnered much diverse scholarly attention. But the remainder of the collection is still surprisingly unknown. The artist who is most surprising to discover, who has been ignored by many scholars, is Parmigianino. Parmigianino is an artist whose works, both painted and graphic, have been the subject of intense art historical studies in many languages, including by Mary, who's listening today. And yet none of the books you see before you, including the comprehensive catalog raisonnés of A.E. Popham and Achim Nahn, publish all of the Parmigianino drawings at Capodimonte. Just going to say that again. The catalog raisonnés that talk about all of Parmigianino's drawings do not even mention all of the drawings at Capodimonte. What director Bélanger and oh yeah, just another pretty picture. It's a image of one of that little head that we were looking at. What director Bélanger and Carmine Romano have referred to as the democratization of the collection represents a pivotal change in the museum's outlook. For the first time, these drawings, with both technical and scholarly information, will be widely available to the public without having to ask permission to see them. It will be a joy to send out my catalog entries into the world for scholars and members of the public to find and to appreciate. Hopefully, in return, scholarship of the Farnese drawings at Capodimonte will be enriched by their contributions. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. I think we're all clapping our
how do I unpin now?
This is absolutely wonderful. I think there's a lot to talk about. We have an incredible brain trust assembled here today. And so I think we're all looking forward to questions. If you would like to turn on your cameras, and if you have a question, just give me a wave or write me a note in the chat. And we can leap in and discuss. Thank you, Claire. I'll begin if I may. Vincent is holding up Caroline's book. Wonderful. Claire, I will start as you think about eventually an exhibition to kind of represent these drawings. And I know that will be long in the planning and many variables, but I wonder if if one might consider not showing just drawings, but also the many different kinds of objects that intersected with the collections of drawings. In fact, I'm teaching with my master's students, I'm teaching a seminar this afternoon completely dedicated to the Tazza Farnese at the Archeologico Museum, which in fact does intersect with many of the Farnese drawings in its own peregrinations from hand to hand. So I wonder how you conceive the exhibition and if if you would consider including other objects to give a sense of the kinds of assemblages that these drawings were part of.
I would say never underestimate the imagination of Sylvain Bélanger, who's just stood up and walked away.
In fact.
There's also a lot of work going on right now, which I don't really know that much about a Farnese collection, but we have spoken about having the drawings separately from that, probably exhibited at the museum. Part of the problem is the condition, and some of these drawings have not been exhibited because they don't look very good, but that doesn't mean that they don't still tell a story. So if you imagine that they're going to be sent off to a city somewhere else with a big Farnese collection, the reception will be, oh, those drawings look awful. But if we can display them at Capodimonte, perhaps even with some clever digital didactics, we can explain about the condition and some of the things that I explained today, and explain why we're showing these drawings and why they're important, rather than having them damned because they don't look as good as they used to.
Yes. Yes. Well, and as you point out, one possible reason for some of their condition is that they were handled and used and used in part, at least I think you're implying, as a kind of study collection. Great. Any other questions?
Sylvain has a question.
Oh, wonderful. Sylvain, please. Prego.
Thank you, Claire, for this very enlightening and interesting presentation. This is the first time that I actually see all these drawings, so even myself, to tell you the truth. First thing about the future, I hope we will be able, with Ufficio de Pietre Dure, to restore these drawings and to give them a better appearance, a better look. That's the first step. The second thing is that indeed we will include them into regular presentation at Capodimonte and in different exhibitions. We are organizing at Parma for, I believe it's October 2021, if COVID doesn't push it further in 22, a rather important exhibition on the Farnese collection. And as you remember, we thought our first idea was to introduce these drawings in the exhibition, and then based on the ugly appearance, because this is the right word, we decided to postpone the presentation, and we are thinking to activate the restoration and to work on it. Obviously, a drawing like those drawings are not only a kind of remain of a drawing, because a lot of them were study drawing or used for larger, innovative and important works like frescoes in the Vatican or elsewhere. One question is, are the Farnese the first one, or Orsini, the first to collect drawings that have been used for decoration and that are not meant to be an object of beauty, but an object of study?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first question.
So, of course, the answer to that is that things really change with Michelangelo and Raphael. But before that, drawings were really just tools that artists used. They were prized by the workshops of the artists because they could help recreate the master's works, perhaps even after his death. But it's really with Michelangelo and Raphael that you start to hear of people collecting drawings. The Farnese collection with 500 drawings in that 1644 inventory, because I think that it's safe to assume that Odoardo may have made the collection larger, but I suspect that the majority of the collection was there by the time that Fulvio Orsini died in 1600. So a collection of 500 drawings in 1600 is very early. And this idea that they were bound in books is also fascinating. Of course, there's Vasari. I don't mean to, the Vasari's great Libro dei Disegni would be another similar early collection, but there's not a lot.
We do know that in the 1490s, Leonardo showed at the Annunziata in Florence one of his cartoons, but that was
different.
Yeah, it wasn't collected. That was a kind of artist's. It was a kind of studio performance in a way. Yeah, so it's not a kind of intentional collection of of working drawings.
There are the Baiardi collection in Parma. There are earlier collections, like the Baiardi collection in Parma is a lot of drawings. Parmigiano drawings, including Parmigiano drawings.
So were the Farnese influenced by that? Is another good question.
It was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
I'm actually really kind of interested that Mario di Giampaolo, who had very close ties to Naples, didn't catalog all those Parmigiano drawings.
No, and I can't fully answer that, except for I don't think anybody here will object to me saying that the museum in the past, not now, made it difficult for scholars to go look at drawings. And I counted, because I thought you might ask me this question. Popham has 6 drawings, so I think there's 25. When I finish my cataloging, that may be slightly less, but let's assume that I think that there's 25 Parmigiano drawings there now. Popham cataloged 6. We know he was there because he wrote on the mats.
Yeah, I saw his handwriting on one of the pictures that you showed.
You guys in the catalog I showed earlier,
that was Mario, but I didn't do. I wasn't doing a catalog, but Mario did the addendum. Yeah.
So there's 6 there, And then Akim has published 19 in his 2007 catalog raisonné. So there's still about 6 drawings that are lingering unloved.
Yeah, I found it. I went recently when Sarah and Sylvain had that wonderful conference, and I got to kind of steal some time and go in there. And it was very difficult to see the drawings. You know, everyone was helpful, but you know, there was no light table. We had to kind of make do. I'm just so excited that you're doing this. This is great. And I have some.
I haven't
we'll talk, but I wanted to, I have some information about that, one of the Bedley drawings that you showed, because, so I'll give it to you, because I published that recently. Yeah.
Great.
I'm finishing my questions because you answer the first and right away, and I want to conclude. As we all know, the art collection in Capodimonte is very narrowly linked to the creation of the Kingdom of Naples in the early 18th century. So to create a new kingdom remained in the 18th century, requested a series of regalian signs. One of them was an art collection, and that explained why Elizabeth Farnese has decided to give her collection to her son. And just like porcelain or of Teatro San Carlo, these were signs that a grown-up kingdom should have had, and Naples had it right away. But that indicates the hugely political importance of a collection. And we know that the Bourbon has used early in the 18th century the collection as not only a sign of power, but also as diplomatic gifts. And I expect that many of these drawings may have left Naples as gift. And of course, these gifts are not documented. For now, we may discover things working on the archives thanks to the digitalization project. That's one of the explanation that this history gives us for the drawings. It remains that even the 20th century, because as you know, this is an old collection, this is an old part of the world with an endless memories of the past, but it's also a very new museum. We have been created in 1957. And so this is a vision that Italy has recreated, reorganized at the end of the war, how to recreate the Italian identity. And the writing of history and the nature of a collection has been extremely important. We know that very often a museum were restored in Italy before housing, like in Palermo, for example. But in this important vision, the Farnese collection as a sign of a royal moment of history was not very well respected. It has been divided. The books, the library, the Farnese library has been sent to the National Library. The antiquities were sent to the Museum of Archaeology with Pompeii, which is another kind of excavation and antiquity. And the Capodimonte became the big Pinacoteca del Sud. Being a Pinacoteca, Capodimonte was forgotten as a drawing and print collection, but remained extremely secondary, as well as decorative art. So this is very much an expression of the 1950s, 1960s vision of museum and art history in Europe, at least, when drawings and art and decorative arts are considered as extremely secondary. That's explain also the situation we have today. I close my comment, but again, thank you very much, Claire. I'm very happy to see not only that you are working well in Piena COVID, beside and all the difficulties. I'm also very thankful to the American Friends of Capodimonte to make your presence possible. And I see Vincent here for the first time for many, many months and almost years, Vincent. And thank you very much, Vincent, for your support. And I cannot see anything more beautiful today than to see La Capraia and Capodimonte working together to help Capodimonte. I think this international support of such an extraordinary collection that remains one of the best kept secrets of Italy is an extraordinary thing. And I really want to thank you, all of you, for your presence, your support, huge intelligence and generosity.
Well, and it's an honor, and thank you for your vision and generosity, Sylvain, and your always open doors. Vincent, I saw that you had a question. Please, if you want to turn on your mic. Oh, no.
Press down on the space bar. That we can't hear you.
If you press your space bar and hold down.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God, incredible. That's for me, was a major technical breakthrough. Sylvain, you said wonderful things. So Claire, it was marvelous. You used the adjective tantalizing. It's just, I can't wait to come and see that stuff again. I don't know when our next trip is, but I hope it's within months, not years. And I think I would love to see them in any condition they're in. And maybe there could be a transitional thing where 5 or 10 are done, but we get to look at 50. They're just enchanting. I mean, I can't get over how gorgeous they are. It would be great to see them in any shape. Did you say did I hear you say that was the only cartoon that's extant for Michelangelo of a painting he did? The only one?
So effectively, there are 3 cartoons, extant cartoons, that are associated with Michelangelo, 2 of which are at Capodimonte. The Venus and Amore, which I did not show, is one that was probably started. There seems to be underdrawing by Michelangelo, but then it was finished by someone else.
Yeah.
Then there's the British Museum cartoon, which we don't know what it was for. We don't know whether he made it to paint it up himself or whether it was made and given to another artist to paint.
Yeah.
So the only one that is a Michelangelo drawing for a Michelangelo painting is those soldiers from Cappella Paolina.
Well, that's a knockout. That's terrific.
I'll send you the photos of them side by side because it's great.
Yeah, I can't resist asking, and I'll stop because Sylvain really wrapped it up so beautifully. But wonderful, Claire. So glad you're there. And because I come from the commercial world, I say I'm not just carpe diem, I'm sort of carpe per diem. So I'm always thinking of other ways we can do this. Would be a tremendous package for patronage to be able to show a lot of people. It's so tempting to make people want to come, to make people want to. This is a great vehicle that you've started. And I'm sorry I missed Carmine. I hope I could get that tape. Okay, I won't talk anymore. It was great. Loved it.
So glad that you're here.
Good.
Carmine, do you have a question?
Where is Carmine?
I was just saying hi to Vince. I didn't see him. So it's so nice to see him strong and good. So I was just
saying hi. Thank you. Hi.
Well, you were great. I'm sorry I was a little bit late, but you were great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
I mentioned your name a lot, so your ears should have been burning.
Right.
Sarah.
I see a question from James.
Yes, thank you. Again, just to reiterate in a word, what a wonderful presentation. It's so exciting to see how you've grafted yourself into the fabric of Capodimonte in this most exciting and needed area of the collection. It's really exciting what you're doing. I wanted to ask a suite of questions, all interrelated, not so much on the scholarly side of things, but the nuts and bolts side of things, the museological side of things. Of course, undertaking a project this obviously has intellectual demands, but the actual praxis, of bringing a project to bear presents its own challenges, unique to that environment. I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit, because it seems so critical to the relevance of your project beyond the intellectual and in terms of access, or this word that you've used, democratization. If you would kind of expand a little bit for us on how your project dovetails with the monumental effort of Sylvain and Carmine to digitize the collection, kind of what role, what opportunities for developing new systems or approaches the drawings collection presents in working with your colleagues there, as well as other perhaps practical opportunities and challenges that you've faced while there in terms of, let's say, normalizing the cataloging system, et cetera. What are some of the grittier details about actually, bringing this project to bear? I know that's somewhat nebulous of a question, but if you could kind of go in that direction.
James, I'll try, but that's difficult. And I may call on Carmine to interject as well. I wanted to say to everybody that the American Friends has had, I'm the third person in line, and hopefully we're about to have a new person as well. And I'd just like to say that of the people on the call today, James, Christopher Backey, and I are the three fellows, the only three fellows that have been of the American Friends are all listening in on that. And that really, I'm really proud of that we're all here.
That's great.
Anyway, James, your difficult question. And I'm looking at Carmine, who's smiling at me because he's been thinking about this a lot more than I have. But we had to think about what are the fields that are important, that people may search and that we need to make accessible on the museum website. And so we made a form of what will be included, but Carmine also has to think about the fact that he wants the website and the catalog entries to look similar throughout whatever object it is. So whether you're looking at a gun from the 16th century or a Gemito drawing from the 19th century, you want the format to look the same, and probably want the fields that people will be able to search to be the same as well. So it's not just things like technique, size, but school and artist and century. I don't know, James, if that fully answers what you asked, but Carmine, I'm sure you're itching to say something, so maybe you can jump in.
Yes, ciao, James. It's nice to see you. And yes, about your question. We just, it's very funny because last week, we had this incredible presentation from the ECCD, which is our catalog system from the Ministry, the Heritage. And they presented a new way to catalog things and objects. And fortunately, it's very close to what we have done in the last 2 years. So it's absolutely, we are just absolutely on the same track, and that's very interesting. Also because I've been contacting them about the normalization, as you said, which is very problematic, not for the Italian system, but for the other systems that are together, Italian, American. So I'm in contact with them to use their system, but for sure we are also using the American system, in a way, Anglo-Saxon system in a way. So everything is going on in just I believe in the right way. And what happened the other week was just very, very nice to see, because at the end we are really in advance. It's very strange because you know very well everything started with you, with the Google Arts and Culture, so, and Christopher and the others. So it was it's very nice that we are even more advanced than the Italians one. So that's very nice. But yes, we are thinking a lot about everything is to normalize the presentation of the drawings, and also, but in the same time, as Claire said, we are also adding some fields that are not usually used, just because we have this freedom to not to be, you know, in a cage. So if a drawing needs new field because it's one of a kind and there's something completely different, or we need to add in a new information, even in the card, yes, we are doing it. So we have in this moment 16 fields that can be filled for the objects. So you can just start from very similar cards like the objects, and then you go always in that, and then at the end it's very easy, because at the end it will be very easy when you search something, when you have a very specific object to be searched, and you know very well the object in a very few information.
That's fantastic to put a bow on my question, because I think the work that you and Claire now with her project there is so remarkable. Could you give us a sense of how many thousands of photographs you've taken now with your monumental digitization project? And is there any other museum in Italy that has such a robust program that you're running there at Capodimonte?
Not, I believe that we were the first, and you know well, because Sylvain had this great idea to you know to bring the museum and put the museum in the new world of the digitization. So right now we just finished the Wunderkammer. We finished the Borgia collection, the Farnese collection. We almost finished the Neapolitan collection and what is called the second floor. We have 1,000 paintings from the vaults, from the deposits, and a huge part of the drawing, the GDS, and we are planning the entire Firmian collection for the next for the end of the year. And what is important is not only taking photograph. It's also, since we have all the inventories digitalized and transcripted, we are also checking all the informations, and we are also in this case adding new things. For example, we just finished the armory for the first time, that it's not even cataloged. I mean, it's not even recorded in the ECCD. And we next month we will put 1,200 cards of armies in a way that have never been cataloged. And we also added some new fields like the weight of the objects. That is very important for exhibition, for the insurance, for sending the object for an exhibition. So we are adding new information, and so it's going on very well. Also, as a checking of information, and as said Sylvain before, we are also digitizing all the documents, and we are preparing an incredible, huge project about the royal palace and all the royal palaces from the Bourbon. That will be amazing. And information that I'm finding. The other day I was in the archives. It's very difficult for me, because sometimes I'm worried that I lost myself in all these informations, because of course I don't want them to close, because I'm there and I'm reading and I'm finding things. The other day I found something about the little book of Giulio Clovio that now is in the States, and the way it was presented when the strangers were coming at the Palazzo Reale to see it. So it was the description of a pillow, a red pillow in silk that was made to present the book. So all these information are coming, and we are connecting things, and it's very, you know, it's an incredible
It's
job in
it's
this.
it's a monumental project and building on an already you know, huge body of scholarship that has long been done on the museum collections. I wonder if before we go, I wonder if I might go back to this this question of why these 50 some sheets have survived, and especially taking advantage of Mary's presence here, you know, the question of why such a large percentage of them are Emilian artists, and was this a kind of conscious selection over the course of time to keep these sheets together? And Mary, you mentioned that there are precedents for these kinds of collections of drawings in Padma, and Claire suggested perhaps that this is, you know, the Farnese's experience in Parma. I wonder if we might flesh out that possibility a little bit more.
Oh, I'm looking at Mary, hoping that I do think a little bit about what Sylvain said, and then I am going to ask Mary to add to that, is that drawings are really easy to give as diplomatic gifts. Imagine if you could give a Michelangelo drawing to somebody. That carries a lot of weight. You know, you don't really want to give away your Michelangelo painting, but boy, a drawing, it's easy to carry and easy to give. And I don't know, you know, I don't think we'll ever know some of the very much of the ins and outs of what happened to all of those 500 drawings, but it's interesting to think about. And because the inventories aren't very clear, I'm sure that there's things in other collections that we just don't recognize.
Yeah.
But Mary, what do you think about that? Because I'm really curious to what you have to say.
I think I need more time to think about these issues. But one point that's sort of related to something else you talked about, I've been looking and studying Carracci drawings, and I'm really convinced that once Annibale gets to Cardinal Eduardo's household, he changes his draftsmanship. And so, you know, and obviously they come out of Emilia's, you know, like that Parma is having studied in Parma. So I just think it's so interesting, this kind of, what you brought up, the scuola that you're mentioning, you know, this idea of this collection of drawings, because, and I think that Annibale consciously produces drawings for Cardinal Eduardo that are much more meticulous than anything that he's doing in Bologna with his, you know, with Ludovico. And so it just, so this is such an exciting project. And I'm looking forward to talking with you, like outside of this, you know, this loop, because I'm just so excited about this, that you're doing this. It's great.
Well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm stuck here.
Well, I'm stuck here in Texas, so.
Let's set up a call.
Sylvain, I see your hand.
Yes, I want to go in the direction that Claire has indicated about the weight of the object and the size of the object. The book Carmine mentioned is the book of hours that is now that Claire showed us in the hands of Giulio Clovio in the painting by El Greco. This book is now at the Pierpont Morgan Library in New York. Carmine find this inventory where the book is indeed described as exposed on a green velvet cushion. I don't remember Carmine in This Is It Capodimonte or Palazzo Reale, one of them. But the date of the last date of this presence, at least in Italy, is, if I recall well, Carmine, do you have this inventory? 1903. Okay, so can you read it for us, please? Because that is extremely interesting. We have to remember that the Bourbons left Italy because they were pushed away, and their entire fortune was seized. Each time that one of the Bourbons, let's quote a very difficult moment, the Revolution of 1799, just before the French moment, a large part of the collection is taken by the Bourbon to Palermo, where they were in exile. Even before in time, when Cardinal Farnese left Rome after the sack of Rome, what does he take with him? He doesn't take the Cofanetto Farnese, which is 35 kilos of silver, gilded silver. He takes the little rock crystal glasses that are part of the decoration of this Cofanetto, because they were the most valuable objects and the most easier object to take with him. So if Carmine can tell us this information, it shows that the Bourbon took a lot of things with them at the end of before 1861, before the unity of Italy, and they took these things to bring money with them outside of Naples, to take money with them outside of Naples and outside of Italy even.
Yes, if I can read for you this, which is so nice, is per un cuscino di raso verde su di cui si mette l'offizio miniato di Giulio Clovio quando si mostra ai forastieri. So it's for in a red silk on which you just put Offizio Minato di Giulio Clovio when you show it to strangers. And it's signed March 2nd, 1780. And what is interesting is that since the very beginning, the Royal Palace of Capodimonte is always defined as museum. So that's very interesting.
But also, Carmine, when you did some research on this book, the inventory, the catalog of the Port Morgan Library indicates that it was acquired in 1903, something like that.
1906, I can check. It's something like 1906 or 1909. But you know, as you said, many things that we cannot find on the inventories, and they're not stolen by French during, for example, the Revolution. They were just sold. They were just you know, given as a gift or just sold by Bourbons. Many things.
So we know for some paintings that were sold by the Bourbons to the Rothschild. The Rothschild family in Naples. They took now these paintings reappeared on auctions. They were in the Bourbon collection, sold to the Rothschild to pay the army against the Savoia at the end of the Bourbon kingdom. I suppose some drawings are to be considered from the same point of view.
Oh, Mary has her hand up.
I just wanted to add to Sylvain's point. Of course, they're in the Louvre right now, but there are a number of Emilian drawings that would be worth thinking about that. I can think of several drawings that are quite extraordinary drawings. So I wonder if they came through that same path. You know, like I'm thinking of a Bedley drawing in particular, but there are other drawings. So yeah, that's really interesting.
James, you had something?
Yes, question for Claire, perhaps another practical question. Why is it, do you think, that some of the Parmigianino drawings have escaped the other systematic catalogs of his work? I mean, what's going on with that?
I think it's about access. And as Mary said, the man who wrote in this book that Mary also worked on, Mario Di Giampaolo, was really well connected and spent a lot of time in Naples. And I've looked at the guest book in the GDS, and he was there more than once. I know that getting photographs was difficult. The museum wasn't always, well, maybe it was never, allowing external scholars to have photographs of things. And so that could be part of it too. I don't know. And I'm constantly surprised by this. Every time I start writing, you know, I turn to the next drawing that I'm working on. I think, well, I'm going to find this in the literature somewhere. And I start looking and I just don't find it. Or I find very scant references to it. Or if it's something, there's been lots and lots of Farnese exhibitions in which the drawings were often included. But those entries are often written by Rosanna Muzzi. It's not to say that her entries are bad. I do not want to say anything bad about her. But to have the same perspective, always looking at the drawing, means that you don't always say something different. I can't fully explain it. It's one of the anomalies of Capodimonte. Carmine might explain it.
If I may, Sarah, Claire is just too gentle for such a long time, and you have to be polite, and it's very nice. But you know, I cannot be polite in the sense that I can allow myself to tell the truth in a way. For many years, all the art historians in the public heritage, they kept information. They didn't allow people to see things, to see drawings. I've been contacted by several scholars who were publishing monography on artists, and they never had access to the only drawing that we have of their subject. So what we are doing now is to open everything and to give scholars all the information. That's why we are working hard. We are working a lot just to, to even to know better what is inside the Capodimonte Museum. So I hope that is something that will never happen again, and we hope that will never happen again.
Mary, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to. So Claire, you showed three little drawings earlier in your presentation. Have those ever been published? Because I've never seen them.
So yes, at least. Hang on, I can't remember completely, but I think that Akim has done at least 2 of them in his book. There's a head of the head that I showed at the very end, my very last slide. Hugo Chapman noticed that he had a period where he was going through all the Gernsheim photographs in the British Museum, and he noticed it in there. And I think that it's published in a footnote somewhere by him. But no, essentially they're not published. And I think Akim got at least that head, and maybe there's a really awkward drawing of a hand that I don't think has been published. I mean, these are tiny little scraps of things. They must have been they must have been cut out of something bigger.
It's a shame that the double-sided one you showed, the recto is so faded. It almost looks like it'd been split, like the Mariette drawings, because that's a really interesting study for the Madonna of the Long Neck. It is. I think it's an early-ish study, and the ink is incredibly faded on the recto, and you saw from the verso that the ink is not so faded. I've also been thinking a lot about these drawings being framed, and one of the anomalies about the Fall of Phaeton in Windsor, I'll try to be quick about this, is that it's always described without the one at Windsor, which we assume is the one from the Orsini inventory, has a red chalk drawing of a head on the back. And that is never mentioned in any of the inventories. But I keep thinking, if it was framed, maybe nobody saw the back. And that's probably true for a lot of these drawings, that the fronts of them were visible, but the rears just weren't.
Yeah. So many wonderful questions. Claire, a really rich and stimulating talk that opens many new questions, many new discoveries to come. And I think this has been quite productive. I mean, I think there might be new collaborations simmering already. So thank you. Thanks to all of you for being here, a wonderful conversation. And I just want to wrap up by saying that our next research seminar is in 2 weeks on Friday, March 26th at 10 a.m. in Dallas, 11 a.m. on the East Coast, and 4 p.m. in Naples. Usually, if you're in Italy, you're joining us at 5 p.m., but it's 4 p.m. because we begin daylight savings. And Francesca will be sending out a reminder next week so that we're all here at the same time. And that talk will be given by James Anno, who's here today. He is now at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, previously an American Friends of Capodimonte postdoctoral fellow in Naples, and he'll present his current project called Circa 1656, Partenope, Plague, and Mattia Pretti's Martyrdom of St. Paul. So we're all looking forward to that, James. And Claire, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful seeing so many friends here today. I really appreciate everybody's interest.
Wonderful to have you and wonderful to see you all, and be well, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.